you, to behold you as my king. I wanna be where you are. I wanna be where you are. Yes.
Oh wow. That was
that was some tea, wasn't it, girl? That was some tea.
Oh, you left me yeah, I didn't know. Okay, come on. And you gave good vocals on that, girl. I think that's one of your best vocals on that. And it started high too.
That's one of the few songs I can really kind of sing a little bit. Like, yeah. Back when I was a little boy, they used to have me sing R. Kelly all the time, but you know, we're not doing that in 2020.
R.I.P.
Yeah,
his music catalog. R.I.P. his music catalog.
When I was a little boy, my cousins and aunties, they used to have me sing "Seems Like You're Ready" and all that R. Kelly tea all the time. They said I used to sing just like him, but girl, that's some old stuff. Yeah.
Who sings this song you just sung?
Tamala Mann. That's the gospel girl, you know. Or no, I'm sorry, Tasha Cobbs. Tasha Cobb. I'm sorry, I messed up. Tasha Cobb.
Tasha Cobb.
Tasha Cobbs. Yeah, Tasha Cobbs.
Okay.
She's a gospel girl. It's just, you know, another black gospel girl, that type of tea. Yeah.
Well, I can't imagine why you need to go to church in this moment.
You already know.
Welcome everyone to a very special edition of Two Safe Queens. We're taking a break from Dick this time, and we're going to be the podcast that's all politics as we talk about the passing of the notorious RBG, aka Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yes.
This happened this past Friday. She died. Actually, I don't have it in front of me, girl. Do you know what she died of?
She died from pancreatic cancer. You know, metastatic pancreatic cancer. Yes, girl.
Pancreatic cancer. Which she had been fighting. This is what, her fourth? I think it's
her fourth battle with cancer. Don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure she first was diagnosed with cancer back in 1999, girl, for colon cancer, and she's had colon cancer, pancreatic cancer. She had cancerous growths on her lungs at some point. You know, she's been through a lot, girl. She really has. She's had heart surgery too. Yeah.
She was a fighter. But so, rest in peace. But unfortunately, we also have to think about the impact that her death will have on the Supreme Court system, our country at large, our democracy as we go into the fall, because this is still happening under the stewardship of Miss DJT. So, girl, I'm gonna hand it over to you. You have a lot of thoughts on this. I have very few thoughts because I just think I'm a little. I have thoughts. It's just, I feel like I gotta hold myself back because not make this more depressing than it already is. So I'm gonna let you run this, girl, because this is something that you have been potentially like we were trying to get y'all girls ready for the fall with some guns tea. This is something that you have been keeping an eye on for a bit, and I kind of thought that people weren't making a big enough deal about the fact that she has still been on the court. So I'm gonna hand it over to you, girl.
Yeah, well, actually, thank you, girl. So I mentioned to you months ago, Miss Malachi, that we need to be on call. We need to be ready to do an emergency show if RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, if she died. I told you that, girl.
Yeah, we were literally like, oh, what happens? Because we were just changing the show format. As you know, girls, we kind of got to, trying to be a bit more less current, is a bit more topical. But we're like, well, what if something really big happened? We were like, what if RBG dies? I was like, well, girl, we gotta do a special edition then. And so
that's
here
what we're
is.
doing, because we're releasing this on Monday. We're usually Wednesday girls, but releasing this a little bit early. But just going back to her history a little bit, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is definitely a feminist icon and a feminist hero. She argued the first case before the court where the court ruled in favor of dismantling gender discrimination. And for the first time, they said that the 14th Amendment, the same one that gives us equal protection of the law on race issues, on sexuality issues. But in 1971, in Reed versus Reed, where you had these two parents fighting over the estate of their deceased son, historically, like in whatever state that happened in, the estate would automatically be managed by the father or a male relative. And they argued, she argued before the court and won. And they said for the first time that, that basically there cannot be discrimination against the sexes, and between the sexes. And it's the first time the court had done that, really. And that was a huge, huge deal back in 71.
And it's important to note that she was arguing in front of an all-male court, an all-white male court. It was really, at this time, that was a T. And ultimately, she was able to persuade them to really kind of reevaluate the ideas of what gender norms have been.
Yeah, and I think Thurgood Marshall may have been on the court then. Yeah, he was. So he was. This court case was in 1971, and he entered the court.
Oh, okay.
He was appointed in 1967. So. So it was an all male court.
Also, just all men.
One black man. Yeah, one black man.
One black man.
But the one, yeah, for sure. So it was a big, big deal. And in fact, she got a number of victories for, gender equity and against gender discrimination, because in 1975, she argued this case called Weinberger versus Weisenfeld. And she actually represented a man this time, who had lost his wife. And this man, he was way ahead of his time in 1975. He was a stay-at-home dad, but then his wife died tragically or unexpectedly. She was the breadwinner, and he didn't qualify for widow's benefits because he was a man. So she showed the court, a court of all 9 men, that gender discrimination hurts men too, right? That when we have to go into these gender roles and these prescribed gender roles, that it doesn't just hurt women, it can often hurt men too, right? Like in this case, and she won that case also. She has been, long before she was on the court, she was an icon in terms of a legal heavyweight, arguing these cases before the court and winning for gender equity. So, we have to applaud her for that. She's only the second woman on the court. Sandra Day O'Connor. Sandra Day O'Connor was appointed by Ronald Reagan in 1981. And so she was only the second woman appointed to the court in 1993 by Bill Clinton.
Come on, Bill.
Yeah, and it was actually interesting. I was watching Jake Tapper. We're recording this on Sunday. I was watching Jake Tapper's State of the Union show on CNN earlier this morning, and Bill Clinton was on there. And girl, I gotta say this. I want to deviate just a little bit.
Lord. You better give props to Bill Clinton again.
Well, no. What it is he was looking good. Like the skin was tight. Like he had some Botox, a facelift. He had a facelift. There's some Botox. There's some fillers or something. He was looking good, but he sounded old, and his disposition was so old. He's getting old, and I was wondering, girl, you said we weren't going to talk about dick, but do you think his dick still works, girl? Because he was always a skirt chaser back in the day.
Oh my God!
I don't think it still works. I think that's why he's.
Why are you making me think about Bill Clinton's
think that's
dick
why he's at Chappaqua and with Hillary, and he's just done, because I don't think that his.
I bet you it's still.
I don't think his ding-a-ling gets hard anymore. I really don't.
Isn't that what Viagra's for?
Yeah, but Viagra doesn't work for every older man. I think it works for a lot, but I think Bill Clinton is done. I think that's why he's gotten shriveled and so old. Even though he looks good, he sounds old. Anyway,
because he can't put it out anymore. It's it's just shriveled
up and everything. But I think, but it's interesting because he talked about, and when he appointed Ruth Bader Ginsburg in 1993. And she was appointed, she was actually appointed by the Senate with a 96 votes in her favor out of 100. And that's unheard of today because of these hyper partisan times that we're living in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now there was an interesting footnote on that I thought was, and I don't know if you're going to touch on it later, so feel free to stop me. But I think there was interesting, one of the people who was one of her big proponents was Orrin Hatch, former Republican of Utah. And one of the things that I think, and we're going to get into some of his critiques about Miss, RBG. One of the things was that she was known for being very particular and thoughtful. It was said that she was very careful about the words that she chose and would take her time to say things. And just has kind of almost, I think for as much as we think of her as this liberal light on the Supreme Court system, she also had and obviously you spoke to her, certain battles she fought, but there was some conservative aspects to her, especially around the ways in which she felt around like Roe v. Wade as an example, is something that she felt should be done in more of an incremental way.
Yes.
And I think that, I think we'll see that in I'm sure some of the answers you'll bring up of some different aspects to her character. But I'll hand it back to you. But I just thought that was, just an interesting little footnote about that.
Yes.
That there was something that, even though it was less political back then, I think there was still something that in some ways they did find appealing about her, as they didn't have to worry about her. She was not I don't think she would have been considered the most progressive, aka left person at that time. To have been passed, but it doesn't take away from her progressive.
Well, exactly, and so
respects.
Definitely, you make a very good point. And in fact, she was, like we said, a lawyer, a legal scholar, a professor of law up until 1980, when Jimmy Carter actually appointed her to not the district court, but the appellate court in D.C., which is usually a funnel to the Supreme Court in many instances. Like I think Brett Kavanaugh actually came from that appellate court, and some of the other justices, Sonia Sotomayor, came from that appellate court in D.C. But but she was on that court, on the appellate court, for 13 years before being appointed. But I guess, so Bill Clinton was talking about how he was going to appoint this guy named Bruce Babbitt, who was a former Arizona governor, and the Interior Secretary under Bill Clinton, and really, I guess that guy was too liberal, too political, maybe even too progressive, I don't know, but definitely not, the Republicans were not a fan. So Orrin Hatch recommended to Bill Clinton to nominate Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg instead, because he said, she's more of a jurist. Really, I think it was more because she had that incrementalist viewpoint of, no, let's do things in small steps. Let's not rock the boat too much. Let's, win small victories little by little, rather than trying to go for like revolutionary tea.
To be fair, to like finish the context for her, her thinking was like with Roe v. Wade, that by doing something incremental, you have less of the pushback that we've seen, which is like, there's been so many challenges to Roe v. Wade and such, an intense pressure on the court system because of it. But I'm also like, maybe we would have never gotten to abortion. So it's like, who knows? Like, I don't believe in incrementalism, but it is a fair philosophy for some people to take, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm kind of halfway in between.
I feel like you're kind of in the middle.
I'm in the
middle.
Yeah, like some things I'm incrementalist on, some things I'm more revolutionary on. I definitely think she might have had a point on abortion, because there's just been such pushback since Roe v. Wade was argued, litigated, and decided in 1973. And there's been this huge anti-abortion movement and push in the state legislatures to try to like regulate abortion or limit abortion, or make it harder to get an abortion. And she was saying, like, if we had gone slightly, more incrementalist, that, there wouldn't be as much of that. Like, people by now would have just accepted that abortion was legal and was the law of the land, rather than constantly trying to overturn it, because it was done overnight in 73. Now, some states had legal abortion, but basically Roe v. Wade made it so every state had to have legal abortion immediately. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, she was well respected by the Republican Senate, including Orrin Hatch, who recommended her to Bill Clinton. But here's the deal, though. She was on the court she was appointed in 1993. There's a few things. So she's had a lot of health issues ever since 6 years into her tenure on the court in 1999. She had surgery for early stage colon cancer. Okay. So that was her first bout with cancer, right? And then 10 years later in 2009, she underwent the same process for pancreatic cancer. Then nearly a decade later, she had 2 cancerous growths removed from her lung. And then July 2020, she had cancerous lesions on her liver, but we really found out that was all related to pancreatic cancer. Now, pancreatic cancer usually is something that the girls don't beat. Like, usually pancreatic cancer, it's discovered late because it doesn't have a lot of symptoms. It usually takes people out within months. But a few notable people like Aretha Franklin and Ruth Bader Ginsburg did beat it at least one time before having it be a recurrence, because both of them then had a recurrence and then ended up dying, Aretha Franklin and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, from pancreatic cancer. So it's one of those diseases that does, if you do actually win your battle against it, which is rare, it usually comes back. you know. And then also she had heart surgery in 2014. And what happened was when she had heart surgery on top of all her cancer diagnoses in 2014, you know, the progressive girls, a lot of girls were saying, you know, retire. We're already in Obama's second term. You know, it's very hard. Usually after 8 years of a Democratic president, we never get another. I mean, really, if we were thinking about it that way, like, we should have known that Hillary was going to lose because we had 8 years of Obama. The white people weren't going to let a Democrat, you know, come in for another 4 years.
I mean, just politically, it's been known that it just switches. There were some people that were like, we know Hillary's not going to win just because it always switches off. Like, people just get tired of one side and then switch to the other.
And I feel like the Republican girls can go 12 years because I think white people, you know, this is a center-right country and white people are inherently Republican unless they're Democrat. But, like, generally white people are Republican. Like, most white people since the 60s nationwide have voted Republican, the majority every single time. So, I mean, just thinking in terms of that, like, we should have known that Democrats never get 12 years. Democrats at most get 8. So, but that being said, they were trying to get her to retire in 2014, a group of legal scholars and progressive activists and other kinds of activists, because they knew the Democrats still had the Senate in 2014 and then lost it during that 2014 midterm cycle. So Harry Reid of Nevada was the Senate Majority Leader, and then Mitch McConnell took the reins in 2015 when the Republicans won that majority that year in Obama's second term. And so they were already worried about when Mitch McConnell took over, like, even while Obama was still president, which, lo and behold, we see what he did with Merrick Garland in 2016 while Obama was still president and Mitch McConnell. So, like, they were right. When they told that girl to retire in 2014 after her heart surgery.
Spoiler alert.
Those girls were right. I mean, and I had been singing that same tune since then too, that she had the chance to retire after that 2009 bout with cancer in Obama's first term. She didn't take it. She took a chance he'd get reelected. Okay, he's in his second term. Retire. 2014, you're undergoing heart surgery, girl. Like, we still have a Democratic Senate that they can you know, name your replacement. You did 21 years on the court. Retire, girl. And she didn't do it.
So it feels like this is the moment to bring up, like, why do you think she didn't do it? I have an idea. Well, do you want me to go first or you want to go first?
Let me go first on this.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, there are a few reasons I think. One is I think she did think, like a lot of people, she did think Hillary was going to win, and she wanted a woman president to name her replacement. You know, I think that's one thing in 2016. I think the second thing is she didn't want to be forced off the court because men are not forced off the court. So she thought that was sexist or, you know, which is inherently anti what she fought for earlier in her life. So I think she thought that was a gendered argument for her to retire based on health issues because they rarely call on men to retire. But I also, so in that way, then I also think it was ego. I think she was thinking, you know, why, I think she just had an inflated view of, I mean, she definitely was an important woman, but I think she had an inflated view of, like, her importance versus the importance of the Republic and Democrat. I mean, like, and, you know, democracy in the Republic and civil liberties and civil rights. I do. So what are your reasons, girl? What do you think?
Girl, I mean, you took it. That was it. Like, I can't even say it better. Like, it was that I think she wanted to see Hillary. She wanted to see both a woman president and then a woman president replace her. Probably, I bet, with another woman. And then I think that ego point, I think there's still, and this is, you know, my larger critique of just certain types of political establishment figures today, is like they are still playing by old rules. Yes. And like, it's, you know, Miss Ruth, she was coming out of depression too. Like, she has lived, I mean, she was what, in her 80s? Yeah. Like, she has lived a life through very different times of our country, and ultimately, though, I think having seen that, I think landed her in a sort of idealism and a certain type of optimism that I think is only really afforded to white people and white people of a certain age, that those of us who are a bit more realist or of other backgrounds just can't believe in. And I think just even from that statement that she made when she passed, and that you're going to her legacy next, she talked about the fact that she would hope that, they would not replace her immediately. And I'm like, girl,
or that the that the next president would replace her.
That they would, the next president.
Yeah.
Sorry, that the next president would replace her. And I was just like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, it just felt like, where have you been? Y'all don't know how gangsta Miss Mitch McConnell is. Like, that girl, the moment when I knew what happened with Merrick Garland, I was just like, this is it. Like, y'all messed up with this one. Like, y'all thought you were playing by old rules. And I just don't, I mean, I'm sure what you touch on, but it's like how they're going to resolve this or where this is going to go. That's probably like the last thing we'll touch on, but I don't know that those girls have it in them. By girls, I mean like the Democratic side, to do what the Republicans do. Because I feel like had it been a Republican judge, they would have retired. Because I think they just think about...
Oh, just like Kennedy. Kennedy retired, to get Brett Kavanaugh on the court. Kennedy retired, the Republicans are just way more ruthless.
They're just more
strategic
in formation.
Yeah,
they're just... Yeah, but I mean, strategic's a better one. But I love a good Beyonce reference. But they're just more in line. Like, they just are more politically, collectively aligned about what. It's not about you. It's about our agenda, our greater conservative / Republican agenda.
And let's remind
one piece of that.
Yeah, definitely. Let's remind the girls. Merrick Garland. He's a appellate court judge, I believe, too, who was nominated by President Obama. He's a very moderate, judge. It was almost like a compromise. I think Obama actually should have nominated a black woman or someone to galvanize the progressive or liberal base. Because what happened was,
because that even made me, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say like that because it felt like, girl, this is it. This is your last, and it's like, this is who you pick. Even just someone of color, we were just like, oh, he's gonna give us maybe someone. But it just felt like, and I get it, the politics of the time, like there was still. We'll leave that for Obama. But I think Obama was still trying to work with Republicans. And I think that his nomination, Merrick Garland, was an indication of that, in my opinion.
Yeah, because Merrick Garland is very much a moderate Democratic, a moderate judge appointed by a Democratic president prior, probably Clinton, but I have to look that up. But that being said, Merrick Garland, when Antonin Scalia, one of the most conservative member of the court, died suddenly in 2016, I think of a heart attack.
Supposedly a queen.
Oh,
allegedly.
Yeah, I could see that. I've heard that too. But yeah, when he died in 2016, and early in 2016, basically 9 months before the election, right? And so I think maybe even, January, February, March kind of tea, Mitch McConnell held it up and said, oh, the next president should decide, who gets appointed in that seat. And we're going to hold it up, and our Republican Senate is going to hold it up and not let Obama appoint this, this judge or this Supreme Court justice because, we have an election coming up, right?
And everyone's like, this is unprecedented. This never happened. And guess what? They did it.
Yeah, they sure did.
They got it done.
They sure
and
did.
They got Miss, was it Neil Gorsuch? Is that the one?
Neil Gorsuch was the one who ended up getting that spot that belonged to Merrick Garland. But, I think had Obama chosen a black female justice or if he had chosen, someone that the progressives and liberals could have really rallied behind, it would have got more girls to come out and vote in 2016. I think that was a huge mistake on Obama's part to nominate a moderate as some kind of compromise with Republicans because the Republican girls are not working with you. They don't fuck with us. Nope. They don't fuck with you. They don't fuck with that. You as a black man, Mr. President, they don't fuck with any of this. They're going to do what they're going to do. So you need to do what you need to do. So now we're much closer to the election in an election year. And Mitch McConnell is saying, oh, well, of course, President Trump should have this opportunity to appoint a justice because both the White House and the Senate are the same party. And that was not the case in 2016 when Obama was a Democrat and we had a Republican Senate. So, of course, we're going to push somebody through, all that type of hypocritical bullshit. And literally, motherfuckers are voting already. People were lining up in Virginia and Montana and a few other states to vote already. We are in the election. Girls are lined up in Virginia for 3 hours to vote or more. So we're voting right now. So you're going to go ahead. She died on a Friday and I think early voting started on that Friday. So I mean, I'm just like, what a slap in the face, and they do not care, girl. They are going to.
I mean, Miss DJT's already said, like, he's like, oh, we should be able to get this through. Like, he's like, we should get this done tomorrow. He said it's going to be a woman. So, of course, I know they're going to cater to, like, well, cater. I mean, it's a fair cater. But it's like, of course, it's like, see, so when the progressive girls kind of attack her, they're like, but we're being diverse and inclusive. We're nominating a woman. How dare, see how they are?
They're definitely going to do that. And not only that, what they're going to do, they have a few options. So, they're going to say that we're like sexist and targeting a woman. They're going to try to flip our own arguments on us as liberals and progressives. And then, but so the saving grace is, of course, there's a few Republican senators who are pro-choice, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, and obviously we cannot count on those girls. They said they don't think that a nominee should go forward, but they have not said that they won't vote for the nominee if that nominee goes forward. But one of the things that the Trump girls might do, so there's two girls they're considering, at least two girls they're considering, or two women, I should say. Amy Coney Barrett, who's a hardcore Republican, like judicial activist type, Catholic, pro-life, written a lot of pieces about pro-life and being anti-abortion. She has 7 kids, 2 of them adopted, I think 2 black kids. So that makes her very, attractive to the Republican girls because they can use, all that tokenism.
Got a couple angles there.
Then there's a Cuban-American woman, a Latina out of Miami, Barbara Lagoa, who's also, Cubans tend to be Republicans and vote Republican and be conservative out of Miami, especially. And they could say, oh, well, this is a Latina woman. This is a woman of color, and you guys are opposing her. So, like, she's a decent bet, too. She's a decent bet, as is Amy Coney Barrett, who's the favorite of a lot of conservatives. And yeah, that's just where we're at. I mean, I think, though, the Republicans definitely, they're really in a position right now, like Mitch McConnell, actually, I'm not going to say he doesn't care if Donald Trump loses the election, but Mitch McConnell is definitely more concerned about the Senate. So he wants to hold on to a Republican Senate more than anything, even if Donald Trump won the election, or lost the election rather. That's all that's what he cares about most. Trump is secondary. Like, and so yeah. So
sorry, I want to let you finish.
Yeah, so what I'm saying here is he's like, okay, do I want to control the court for a generation? Which I do, of course. Or do I want to win the Senate again? And I think Mitch McConnell's taking the gamble, like, okay, if the liberal and the progressive girls get really activated, they have raised $100 million since RBG died, like for various progressive groups and Senate races. But if I lose the Senate, it might actually be worth it to get another justice in there and to transform, this country for 50 plus years. Like that gamble is worth it for those girls.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where I fall to that side, where I think that I don't think the Senate is what matters most. I think they are focused on the agenda. And I think the courts have been the agenda since Roe v. Like, the courts have been the agenda for every Republican president, Reagan, Bush. Like, it has always been about the courts.
Yes.
And I think in this moment, we've seen more than ever that literally the only thing that has held Trump back has been the courts. So without the courts, where would we be? And I think that has been the goal. It even kind of came up when we were doing one of our global episodes, talking about like Poland of all places, and talking about how the priority for their prime minister was the courts. And I think why I ultimately think that McConnell's more focused on the courts than even the Senate is looking at the track record of what has happened since Ms. DJT has been in office. She has appointed the second most federal judges. So she's at 216 as of September. It was 170 over the summer, by the way. So they've literally been pushing through these judges. And how it works, it's something I don't always think about. It's like basically Trump would appoint a judge, but they need to be confirmed by the Senate. Right, girl? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, you're getting it right. You're right.
Yeah. So that means that, so they're working in conjunction. And there's been times when they've been doing this shit, even when it's during recess, even when the Dems aren't even there, because they have the votes. So they don't need to even wait. They don't care about it. They don't need him. So he's already done the second most federal judges, and with the potential to pass Jimmy Carter, who has done the most at 228. So there's the potential by the end of the year for Trump to have done the most federal judges in the appeals court. And sometimes we don't, like, I always hear appeals court, but I never really think about it. So when we think about the Supreme Court only sees, thinking about the amount of cases that happen in our country, the Supreme Court sees very few. I think it's like 2% or something. The majority of cases that get seen are actually happen during the appeals court. And the appeals court is where, thinking about on the federal level, that like, basically where things get challenged, okay? And appeals court is, I think there's like about 179, I think, appointees, but the areas that an appeals court cover are millions of people. That's such an impact that court has. So thinking about going back to CJT, generally for presidents, the median amount of justices or judges that they get on the court is 32. Trump has already done 51. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. And you just have to think about it. It goes district courts. Appeals court is where you can appeal the district court rulings, and they have so much power. And then the appeals court leads right to the Supreme Court. Like, that's right under the Supreme Court, the appeals court.
And then that's the last one I want to mention with Miss TJT doing she's already had 2 justices. That puts her on tie with Obama, Clinton, and Bush, who also appointed 2 people. And if she gets through RBG, that'll be her 3rd. That will put her at the most. So I think before this happened, I think and I think this was something that Miss RBG talked about. She called this presidency an aberration. And I think that with her death, that's no longer the case. Because even I had kind of kept up this optimism that maybe this is a big stumble. It's a big stumble, no lie. Like, this is a, democracy, girl. Like, we could rattle on for days all of the ways that unprecedented things that have happened that no other president get away with, and that have really shaken the foundation that will still already take time to recover. But it still felt like, oh yeah, Trump will go down as like one of the worst presidents. But I think that with his effect on the courts, with the fact that, I was just reading, just to prep for the show, an article about an appeals court justice who literally got a not qualified rating by the Bar Association, was still able to get through and become an appeals court judge. And that so many of these people have values around, anti-abortion, around discrimination, around all these things that fit in with the conservative values, fit in with Republican values, that ultimately I think that if he gets to replace his 3rd justice, and already, whether or not he gets to replace the 3rd justice, I still think he probably will, but we'll get into that. But already with all these justices that he's appointed, will make him impactful. Because even with these federal justices, these are lifetime appointees in the same way as the Supreme Court. So these are people who are going to shape our culture, shape cases. Thinking about with Black Lives Matter, with the ways in which some of these states are like doing retribution, where they're forcing like protesters who got arrested can't vote. Like that stuff, the only way that stuff that gets positioned by like, assemblies, and lawmakers, the only way that stuff gets challenged is in the fucking courts. And the fact that he has done so much and they just push this through, I think they have realized in a way that Democrats haven't. And I think there's a critique you say, girl, about how sometimes we get stuck on certain things. And I think, I'm not going to say, I'm not going to, I get the progressive philosophy of like, again, like I said, I'm not incrementalist girl, but I think there are ways in which I think sometimes we get so stuck that even for, I think, the more moderate of us, we miss the ball. And I think the conservatives have realized that ultimately the part of our state and our government has the most power and impact on our lives and culture in the state, United States, are the courts. And that if you control the courts, you control so much of what will happen in our country. And I think about that in terms of like, some Supreme Court tea that I always still think about. And now we can probably kind of get into like whether you think this will happen or not. But I think about like the Hobby Lobby ruling, about that it protects for-profit corporations to be exempt from regulations if like, they have religious objection to it. Like that's something the Supreme Court upheld. Like, think about that. I think about like, Citizens United, like, corporations are people. I don't remember if you mentioned it, a little tired, but I mean, talking about like how the Voting Rights Act has been gutted. Like there's so many, and now we're getting to this election. Like there's so many things that just the courts have impact on. And I feel like this is a real moment, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Ruth Bader Ginsburg really, by not retiring back in 2014,
take it back, girl. You like, she fucked it up.
She fucked up. She fucked up. Like, girls are like, you know, it was bothering me because a couple girls asked me like, oh, why haven't you posted anything for RBG on your personal pages? Because, you know, I post pretty prolifically. Or why haven't you posted anything on, you know, the Two Safe Queens pages? And girl, I'm like, no, because I was fucking mad. I was mad, and you were in a group text with me, Miss Malachi, where I went off because I'm like, I was fucking mad. She fucked up, and you know, and honestly, I think her entire legacy is at stake. She really messed up, and so here's a couple, like, one of the issues on November 10th, a week after the election, the Supreme Court is going to be hearing arguments about dismantling the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, like. You know, abortion rights are really on the line. Roe v. Wade is not really settled law. The Republican girls could definitely overturn that. Some states would outlaw abortion overnight. We would have a hodgepodge of abortion laws all over the country. Affirmative action is done. The Republican girls have been trying to get rid of affirmative action at the private college level, like the Ivy League university we went to, girl. A lot of state schools, it's already done because states have already barred affirmative action, but the other states where it hasn't been barred, like, it's an issue, you know, in employment, you know, affirmative action, which is very important to creation of a black middle and upper middle income group of people, or a black middle class, like, that is done. We are in trouble. And I think what's interesting, and
do you think marriage equality is on there?
I think marriage equality is a little too recent. I think in 2015 is like, that feels too recent for them to come back and rule on.
Because I was trying to wonder if I should tell the girls. Like, I have some girls who, like, you know, they've been with their partners a bit. I was like, girl, you know what it's time for? It's time to get that ring, girl.
And we're still in the Roberts Court, and the Roberts Court is the one who decided that in 2015. And I think, actually, believe it or not, I do think RBG, one other reason she may not have retired in 2014 is she knew that marriage equality was coming before the court in that cycle. And I think she wanted to be a part of the ruling in favor of marriage equality, which she did get, but at what cost? At what cost? You could have let that is part of your legacy still, even if you had retired by then. Like, yeah, definitely another girl would have taken your place, a Democratic girl, but who would have ruled the right way also. I think that wasn't worth it. I think you fucked up. Yeah. And granted, R.I.P. to her, rest in peace, but I really was pissed. I was pissed because I knew this moment was coming, and I warned you. Yeah.
But I mean, there's some other, I mean, I think she's been, I think there's also just a way in which sometimes people, not eulogize, like, after she did, but like, lift up, I can't think of the word. Sorry, girls. My sleep schedule's been fucked up. But just the way the girls kind of lift up certain political figures and how the dangers of that. And I think there's been other kind of problematic tea. You know, I kind of was talking about her incrementalism, but there's been other stuff that I think you can see those, you know, undercurrents of that I think you noted, girl, around some of her politics herself.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, she said about Colin Kaepernick, I think it's dumb and disrespectful that he's kneeling during the national anthem at first. Now, she did retract it. She apologized for it, not for the substance of the comment, but just that she shouldn't have said it. And so I definitely took some pause on that. I was like, girl, what? Like, you're supposed to be this...
And she talked about how she was like, oh, I just wasn't aware of it. But there were other things where she was like, she seemed to be aware of stuff. And I'm like, were you really not aware of the context in which he was kneeling?
And she also, you know, on top of that, okay, so that was one thing. But the fact that since 1993, since she's been on the court, on the high court, in the Supreme Court, she has literally only had one black law clerk. And that's a big deal because being a Supreme Court clerk is like a way of getting into like top firms, like having like the best legal jobs. And if you're supposed to be this liberal progressive icon, but you have one black law clerk in, you know, over 25 years, like, that's ridiculous.
I'm curious if she's had other clerks of color.
I would imagine so, but like, I mean, I'm just like...
But still, though, we're talking about black.
Yeah, and even that, I mean, I bet you that there's a possibility that has been limited too.
We know that's not. I mean,
that's probably been limited too. I can't say that for sure that she's had a bunch of Latinx or Asian,
we
or
know.
Native American.
We just know.
Yeah,
we just know.
I mean, because I mean, honestly, because I hate to say it this way, but you know, in the history, right? Like, black people, we're the most visible minority group in terms of like our numbers. I mean, Latinx people are more plentiful than us, but in terms of us being visibly POC, like we're the largest, most visible minority in that particular way, especially back in the 90s and prior, right? I mean, Latinx people only surpassed us in probably the 2000s or 2010s. So I'm just saying, like, for her to have one black law clerk in all these years is unacceptable. And she's also had some problematic rulings, like in favor of the Appalachian pipeline, which a lot of Native Americans opposed. And, you know, Sonia Sotomayor and some of the other liberals on the court ruled against, but she went with the Republicans and ruled on behalf of the pipeline against Native Americans. And now I will say this, I think that, but actually I did look up today, like what the Native American community is saying about her death. And they're actually still very much, you know, mourning her. You know, she definitely was a part of this more recent verdict, McGirt versus Oklahoma, that ruled that much of eastern Oklahoma remains native land. And she was definitely a big part of that victory for the Native American community, as well as, you know, when the Voting Rights Act was gutted in 2013 by the Roberts Court, she wrote a stinging dissent of the other side. And Shelby County versus Eric Holder versus Holder. And so she's definitely, you know, for the most part, definitely been on the right side of things. Obviously, there's some times where she's had some problematic tea, but I think it shows us that we can't really lionize and deify any particular political figure. I mean, AOC, for me, honestly, she hasn't done any wrong to me yet. I'm sure she has done some things that aren't tactically perfect, but she's always on point in terms of her like politics and her beliefs. But she might fail us at some point. She might fail us at some point.
She might, but I also think there's a self-awareness there, because she literally, you know, I know you have reposted recently to our timeline her talking about, of all things, that you're not voting for Biden, you're voting for the courts, you're voting for these things. But she was basically in that same, you know, video, and she was talking about how like no one person can fix everything. And I think that's the self-awareness that someone with an ego won't have, because they would have an outsized idea of their importance. And I think that's one of the good things about AOC is she says, it's not about me. It's not about the next president. It's not about, you know, Bernie or Elizabeth Warren. It's about all of us. It's about us as citizens, us as people, to make things change and make our government and our country work for us.
Yeah, because she is only one person. I think maybe that kind of self-awareness comes with, you know, therapy and maybe millennial and Generation Z kind of tea. That's maybe not boomer and silent generation kind of tea to be that.
I mean, we've also seen, I think part of us, we've also seen the failures of our parents, the failures of their of their kind of self-interest. Like, why are we still renting while you all own these buildings? Like, this kind of generation that is just focused on themselves. We've seen where it fails, and we continue to see it where we're in this pandemic right now. And it feels like it's every person for themselves, but we're kind of trying to move away from that. Because any of us could be that person on the street if you only have enough rent for a month. So, and
there's a couple, you know, in the one thing too, like, cause they you know, you have Ruth Bader Ginsburg is all over t-shirts and tote bags, and she's celebrated as a liberal progressive icon, and she is in many ways, right? But I always said, like, Sonia Sotomayor is the person that people think RBG was. Like, she is actually like almost always, always on the right side of things. Like, she is the more stinging progressive on the court, and, you know, writes these very stinging dissents, and is very, you know, very much so more activist in specific ways. And she's a woman of color. She's a Latina. And I just feel like we got to give her props. Like, I don't want to deify anyone, but that's the girl I hold down the most on the court, like, is Sonia Sotomayor, for sure.
I mean, because I think being on the conservative court, definitely, not to say that everything you say is absolutely right, but I think also just being, you know, a lot of the work that RBG did, as I think you put it really great offline, was like before she even got to like the Supreme Court. And then in some ways she's been hampered or been restrained by being on a more conservative leaning court.
Yeah.
But girl, I think we should get into like, well, what's next.
What the solution? Like, yeah, I do. Before we get right into next, I want to say one thing about what you just said. It's very much true. It's the same thing that happened to Thurgood Marshall. Like, he obviously, he was the man who advocated, and was the litigator for Brown versus the Board of Education, which got rid of the separate but equal doctrine in 1954. And he became a huge heavyweight legally for civil rights and justice. Got on the court, couldn't do nearly as much on a conservative court as he did as a litigator prior to being a justice. So same thing happened to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Yeah. She argued all those gender discrimination cases. She won before the court, but when she got on the court, she was constrained by being in the minority on a conservative court. So that's some tea. But so solutions tea, is that what you want, girl? You want us to give some solutions? Is that what it is?
I mean, personally, I think he's gonna get that justice on. Because I don't think the Dem girls are strong enough to fight like the Republicans did. So I think I'm trying to figure out where I'm moving next. but yeah, girl, give your optimism, girl. I'm depression. So give us hope of what the strategies are. I've heard different things, from the fact that stuff down the line that I think is totally pie in the sky of, we'll just add more justices, to the fact that those swing voters, aka the Senate swing votes, like Susan Collins, and people been talking a lot about Lindsey Graham. But yeah, what do you think, girl?
Yeah, so what you're talking about in terms of adding more justices, that's called court backing. And that is what a lot of the scholars, the liberal legal scholars, are saying is the solution. Like, if Trump does get this justice on the court, which he likely will, I think you're right. I think he will. What legal scholars are saying, okay, so that'll actually mobilize a progressive and liberal base who maybe wasn't super motivated to come out and vote for Biden, or even Biden-Harris, because she was, a prosecutor and has that history. And so, the Bernie girls, the former Jill Stein girls, a lot of them maybe weren't planning to vote in this election. I think this could get them to come out and vote. And it will rally some conservatives, but for sure, it's going to rally a lot more progressives and liberals. And I think with that energy, we very well might win the Senate. We probably will if he gets this justice in, I think, before the election, or even tries to get this justice in before the election. And what that means is that we can eliminate the filibuster, which basically says, you have to have 60 justices for a Supreme Court justice. Mitch McConnell, in some capacity, has already gotten rid of that. Harry Reid, before him as a Democrat, got rid of it for lower level judges.
You mean 60 senators, not
60. I'm sorry, right. 60 senators, right? To end debate on whether to vote for justice. But that Mitch McConnell's gotten rid of that. So the Democratic majority, they're saying, should get rid of the Senate filibuster in general. Okay, number one. Number two, obviously, packing the court means adding more justices. We originally only had 6. They moved it to 9. Now, FDR tried to pack the court during the New Deal, because a lot of his stuff was getting blocked by the courts. A lot of his progressive, economic plans and policies were being blocked by the courts, and he threatened to pack the court, and that actually backfired against him, because a lot of moderate Democrats and whatnot said, oh no, well, we don't want to be involved in adding more justices to the court, because he wanted to add like between 13 and 15. But I think now, in the era that we're in now, that if Biden was open to that, and he doesn't sound super open to it, but I think he might change his mind on that. I think that could change some things if we can get 13 to 15 justices total, and rather than just relying on this group of 9. And
so 13 to 15 Supreme Court justices?
Yeah, so adding 4 to 6 more justices. Yes.
I just feel like
the way of this too is supposed to be depoliticizing the court. So basically choosing them not completely, but trying to depoliticize the court and not make it so, do or die in terms of like the numbers. But that won't really work out that way. It will still be politicized. For sure.
That part, because of course the other Republicans will be like, "Oh, you're politicizing it." When like
also they'll count the numbers. They'll be like, "Okay, well, there's 13 now. We're gonna make sure we always have 7." Like they'll do that. That's what.
I just don't. That just doesn't. I just think like that sounds just like the idea like, oh, we're gonna do away with the Electoral College, because they talked about changing the Supreme Court back with the Merrick Garland tea was happening. I just think we don't have ambitious leaders on the Democratic side to truly push that kind of stuff forward.
Well, the electoral. So here's one fundamental difference between them, and I am going to correct you.
Please do, because for me it sounds like the same kind of
pie in the sky. It's the same idea in a way, but the Electoral College would require revising and making an amendment to the Constitution, which requires either 3/4 of the legislature or 2/3 of the Congress or 3/4 of state legislatures. That would be nearly impossible to ask, as the politics are right now. However, the Constitution only says that there has to be a Supreme Court. It does not specify how many justices there have to be. So we don't have to amend the Constitution to change the number of justices. All we do is have to pass legislation by having both the White House and both houses of Congress. And we could add justices just via legislation. It doesn't even have to happen via a constitutional amendment.
Okay. Yes. It still feels in the clouds for me, a little lower to the ground. Like I can almost kind of see the ground, but it still feels like it's in the sky.
But you are going to gag.
We'll see.
You are going to gag. Yes. This is a surprise I had for you. I told you ahead of time I had a surprise for you. Because this is generally something that a lot of progressives, and progressive legal scholars advocate, is this packing the court. Yeah. I mean, it was something FDR, who's probably the most progressive president in history, minus the Japanese internment, because we know that was some fucked up shit, right?
And he was also, racist. All those white presidents.
But progressive then. In terms of actual economic policy and whatnot, right? Girl. But
he did that.
Yes. Guess who was the biggest proponent of adding justices to the court and packing the court out of all the presidential candidates? Guess who it was?
Out of all the presidents, this is a current.
It was a Democratic presidential candidate, girl. From this cycle, from the 2020 presidential campaign cycle, lost the primaries. Who do you think was the biggest proponent of packing the courts?
Pete Buttigieg.
Yes, girl. Yes.
I knew it. Yes. I think I maybe also remembered something about him. Actually, I do remember he's actually talked a lot about the courts.
Yes. And so and the girls thought, he's generally a moderate girl, a somewhat problematic white queen in specific ways, right? It's not really a social justice pro-black kind of white queen at all. Very moderate, very respectability type with her little little picturesque white picket fence, white husband and that type of tea.
Jason's cute.
He's cute. He's nice.
I'd hang out with him. I go get drinks with her.
Yeah, but what I will say is that girl was the main one in the 2020 cycle who was talking about we need to change the number of justices, and everybody thought that was so radical. Everyone thought that was the most radical thing in the world. It actually. For her, that is a very radical type of tea. Yeah.
What do you remember why I can't remember why. I can't remember why she was saying
she was trying to do it on some moderate type of tea, though. She wants to depoliticize the courts.
Right.
She wants to depoliticize. So it's not because she's angry about Merrick Garland.
No, man.
Or she was, but that wasn't her main point. She wants to depoliticize the courts. She doesn't think that politics belong so much in the courts.
Yes.
And that was her.
And they have definitely gotten more political. Yeah.
So, yeah, but I think, for the most part, I will say as far as RBG's legacy, she did some amazing things before her tenure in the Supreme Court. She did some amazing things on the Supreme Court. Her legacy, her feminist legacy, really, to me, extends long before she was on the court. I really respect what she did on voting rights with the 2013 ruling and writing that amazing dissent on behalf of, Black voting rights in southern states. But I will say this. I think if we don't pack...
fucked up.
She fucked up. And I think if we don't, R.I.P., she's going to be she might have even been buried by now because she, in a Jewish burial ceremony, which usually happens very soon after death, right? But what I will say, I'm not sure if that was the case, but my guess is it is the case. But what I will say is this. I think that if we don't get to pack these courts, if Biden doesn't win... and we don't win the Senate, and we don't get to, if we either don't get to appoint her replacement or don't get to pack the courts afterwards, she fucked up her legacy, and I respect her, but she's not someone I'll be hollering, on behalf of and celebrating.
Girl, I still think she fucked up. Yeah. It's their legacy's already fucked up. The fact that we're even in this, we either have to hope that the Dems have got enough grit and to fight the Republicans, because they literally are like, we're doing this tomorrow. They're not playing.
Yeah, they're not playing.
Those are those girls. So we either have to hope the Dems can rally enough grit to fight them, or hold them off until the election, or we have to hope people come out. Like, it's a bunch of hope. It's built on hope. And I think that already makes it, that's not it. Like, if we're literally hoping that our democracy is going to continue, that means you already fucked up, girl.
She fucked up.
This is not an aberration. You're putting us at a crisis.
She put us at a crisis. Yeah, at a crisis level. She really put us in a terrible place. To be scared is LGBT people, is people of color, women. Like, we are all scared because this could be the end of so many of our rights. And just because she wanted to stay on the court, she didn't want to be told to retire in 2014. She fucking
didn't want to get her ass up out of the seat and go home.
And I said that back then in 2014. Why isn't she retiring? I said it back then. I'm saying it now. She fucked up. She fucked up. And we might offend some girls. We might offend some white women. But I will say this: there are some great white women out there, of course. But a lot of times, white women disappoint us. And this was one case where she fucking disappointed us. She did.
Can't say anything better. So we're gonna be watching this one, girls. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Yeah. That's our special edition show. Y'all know what it is. Follow us on social media, where we'll be lamenting the end of our democracy at Tuesday Queens. Sorry, girls, we had to get real this time, but our normally scheduled Wednesday show is going to be a treat. We have some guests on, so she is not as heavy as this show, so I think it'll be a nice palate cleanser before we get back to our regularly scheduled episodes. Don't forget to rate us and review us. I hope y'all stay healthy, safe. I don't know, I did this backwards. Safe, healthy, and saved, and mentally strong. It's hard out there, girls. Call people, check in with people,
and donate to
take
Senate,
step away from social media.
Yeah, but donate to Senate Democrats too, who are running for re-election, or running for election against Republican incumbents. Make sure Vote Save America has a huge platform where they're raising money for potential Senate Democrats. Vote to Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, girl. Donate.
This is the
volunteer.
time.
This is the time. AOC said it best. You cannot idly stand by at this time. You really need to be a part of democracy now. Stop bullshitting.
Is that the final word, girl?
That's the final word, yes.
All right.
Okay.
See y'all on Wednesday.
Bye, girls.